I'd like to welcome the author Cameron Scott Kirk, who is reaching us today from New Zealand. Cameron is the author of two grimdark novels whose latest book, The Beautiful Harpies, is out now. Cameron, it is good to have you here. Could we begin by... Yeah, nice to hear from you. Could we begin by talking about the world of the Beautiful Harpies? What inspired the premise for this town where women mysteriously go missing and their husband end up dead?
I'm not sure where this particular novel came from, the setting for it. I think I was in the mood for like a murder mystery to start out with. A lot of unanswered questions. I've been reading some books myself or watching movies, and I like a movie where there's a question that needs to be answered in the beginning of the movie. Another question comes up. So, I mean, I'm a big fan of the murder mystery type things. So I think I was hoping to do some kind of fantasy, dark fantasy, grimdark murder mystery. At least that's how it started out. And the setting for the book is Diceil, which is a kind of a dark industrial type city. I think one of the interesting things that I didn't realize that I was doing in the book, I only realized later, is that certain characters are walking around, like Thackeray, the Constable Thackeray, and Sister Kempson. They're walking around the city looking for people, and certain men who are dying have certain professions. There's a lamplighter, and there's a rat catcher, among other jobs, and these people end up dead. And I didn't realize at the time, but when the detective and Sister Kempson, they're trying to track down these people before they die, it's actually allowing the reader to go through the city with them and see all of the different aspects of this city. So it's a in terms of world building, I didn't realize I was doing it at the time, but it's a great way to build a world where the characters are trying to catch a murderer or stop a murderer from striking again, and visiting the workplaces of all these people. So, and by the halfway through the book, you have a really good feeling of who's working in the city and the strata, the social strata of the city. We have lard collectors, fat collectors, rat catchers, as I mentioned, lamp lighters, um, butchers, cider makers. So these men, their professions allow us to see into the city. And this was something that was almost accidental. I didn't quite realize what was happening, but after all these men had been described in their workplaces, the city's it's a pretty well developed location for the story to happen in now. So I was kind of pleased how that worked out. And I'm going to have to file that away in the back of my mind for future work, I hope. Yeah, so the characters are walking around the city meeting or trying to save men in different professions, and at the end of it we have a really well developed, I hope, view of the city. But that was kind of accidental, but I'm happy that it happened the way it did.
Cam, it is easy for us to suspend our disbelief and be absolutely convinced by this dark world you have created. How do you approach writing about a place beyond reality?
Well, I'm not sure it's beyond reality, because when I write, about a place, I can often see the place in my head, or it's an amalgamation of different places that I've seen. So it's not necessarily completely created from nothing. It's just something that I may have witnessed in my own lifetime. I'm very interested in abandoned structures, how nature can reclaim buildings. So, you know, you might think about a post-apocalyptic world where vegetation is growing back on buildings. So I just think, you know, most writers will have seen things, an old house, an old barn, and it sticks in the back of your head. And then you might have seen images from TV shows or movies or books, and then it all comes together. So it's not necessarily a place beyond reality. For me, it's almost very real, based on what I have seen in my own life and or read about. So yeah, a lot of my books aren't really fantasy settings. They're kind of real world. I guess that's where the grimdark comes in. You know, it's not um, dragons or fairies. It's kind of realistic how a building might collapse, or how, you know, we've all seen the pictures of Victorian England in the 18th century or what have you, where it's kind of dirty and smoggy and smoky. So that kind of thing really gets into the mind of a writer, and we can tap into that. So I'm not sure it's beyond reality at all. I think it's quite real. It's just dressed up in a different way, if you understand what I mean.
Interesting. And so that brings a second question about women, real women or harpies. So your book opens with a quote about the wickedness of woman, and that there is no anger like that of a woman. And this quote comes from an abbot at the first known monastery of women established 1200 years ago in France. Why, Cam, did you put that at the top of the narrative? Why is that a good place to start?
Well, for a book about women who are murdering their husbands, I think it's a pretty good place to start. When I read that quote, it just popped out, and I have to be honest, it made me laugh when I first read it, because I just said, yeah, you know, that's that's very true. You have to wonder what would cause an abbot to close his doors, or a religious man to close his doors to women. I think the quote goes on to say something about spite, or the more details about just how women could disrupt the peace of a community. I found it quite amusing, because it's not something you would expect an abbot to say. It's not a very religious thing to say, is it? It's not a very welcoming or very it's just not a godly thing to say. I was struck by the irony between an abbot who is meant to be a holy man, and his clear he's had some very bad experiences with women, quite clearly. I would like to know exactly what had happened to make him say this, because I think there's an interesting story behind that. But of course, everybody has a wicked element, don't they? Men, women, children. So I just found it quite amusing, and in the novel itself, without giving away too many spoilers, I guess I probably shouldn't be mentioning too much about murder, but the book does focus on a bunch of angry women who take the law into their own hands. So I think it's quite appropriate in that context. And I just found it a really interesting quote, to be honest. It grabbed my attention. So hopefully it grabs the reader's attention as well.
Yeah, it did. Yeah. So, do your characters inhabit your world during the writing process, or do you inhabit theirs? How real is the world you are creating, to you as you write? What does the room of your mind look like during the months of writing? Can you just tell us about this?
I think the characters do not inhabit my world. I think that would be very unpleasant. It would not be a nice thing to walk around with unpleasant characters in your head all day. I enter their world when I choose. When I'm ready, I'll come into my writing room and I'll sit down and I'll get myself in the mood, and then I'll jump back into that world. So it's me going into their world. I have heard stories of artists or actors who take on a role and the role tends to haunt them, perhaps in their waking hours or their own life. I'm not like that. When I'm not writing, I tend not to think much about my characters. They're not there. But when I have to get back into the book and continue writing the book, um, I I'll open a door and walk into their world. So I think that's a good thing. They're not invading my world. I'm invading theirs, and I can leave when I want, which is a good thing because, as I say, if you can't leave, if they start haunting your brain, you will not be in a good place. So as you've mentioned, I write grimdark, and a lot of my characters are dark and violent. I don't want them inhabiting my brain, my mind. I don't want them in my mind. So I lock them away, and I jump into that world when I have to. I like the phrase, the room of your mind. That's not something I've seen before. What does the room of your mind look like? I think I'm really lucky. I can turn on and turn off when I have to work. Um, as I've mentioned, I don't think much about what I'm writing when I'm not writing, but I go through an interesting process when I get back into writing the next chapter, perhaps. I have to, it's almost like, how could I give you a clear description or analogy? I need to get in the right frame of mind. I need to be in the right headspace. It sometimes takes 20, once I start writing, it's 15 to 20 minutes. And, but there's a point where the world around me disappears and I'm in that world. It's almost like I'm having to get into a hypnotic state in my own head. That's why I write with music a lot. I need this particular type of music to put me over there in that space. A lot of my best writing is done at night. So I have my little moods and my little spaces that I inhabit. And it's almost like I'm getting into a trance. And sometimes I'll come out of the writing and I won't know where I am, or I'll look at the clock and think, well, 90 minutes just disappeared, or what day is it? So yeah, I'm inhabiting their world when I'm in that, in the world of the book. And I come out, but I have to get in. It's not easy to get in sometimes. Sometimes if I'm distracted, or if the music isn't right, or people are walking around me, or I'm in a too busy environment, I need to be alone a lot of the times, and I need to, it's very much like meditation, where time and space just dissolve. So so yeah, I do go through a process where I'm almost melting away from this world and coming into another. But as I mentioned at the start of this particular question, I'm very lucky in that I go into their world and I observe. I feel I'm very much like a fly on the wall, is the expression. And I'm observing all these things happening and I'm writing it down. I think when my characters take on a life of their own, that's when I'm in a good space where the character will say something and I'm watching them and I think, oh, that's good. That's an interest. That word came out of that character's mouth and I'm watching them. I didn't write it. I didn't say it. It didn't occur to me. The character comes out with this sentence or phrase that is perfect for them and I'm watching them say it. I'm like, great, I'll write that down. So it's almost like this is happening in front of me and I'm watching a movie and writing it down as I go. So in a lot of ways, it's nothing to do with me. I am a vehicle, if you like, for the story to happen. I think the really hard process of writing a novel is at the start when you're creating things. But once the characters get a life of their own, you're no longer creating, you're observing and writing as they have their adventures. So I really do go into a meditative state where I'm observing things happening in this world and quickly writing it down as quickly as I can before it escapes me. So it's not much of a creative process on my part. I create the characters, but they're much like wind-up dolls. You do that, the key in the back and you wind it up and watch it go. I create the doll, but where it's going to go, I don't know. So I think a lot of writers will tell you the same thing, that when the characters are well-rounded and they have their motivations and their goals, they will take off in places that you didn't expect. So the room of my mind, it's I'm really in another place, observing much of the time. And I come out of this trance when the writing is over, and I often have to look around me and blink and think, oh, okay, I'm back in this world again. So very immersed. So I hope the reader can get that same feeling when they're reading a book of mine, that they close it and they're like, okay, oh, I'm back in my world again. I think that's my goal as a writer, is to really make the four walls of the reader's room just disappear. And then when they come out of the book, they're back again. So much as I feel when I'm writing. That's my goal, at least, to immerse the reader in another world.
That's a wonderful goal, I must say, and I have personally read The Beautiful Harpies, and I had this feeling, I was with all the characters and the world around me disappear, and I can't wait to know more about everyone. But
well, maybe one day we'll get another installment. Right now, I feel that it tied up nicely. But if they knock on my door again, or if they want me to come back, I can definitely see where things may expand a little bit. But yeah, I think for now they're not calling so much to me. Perhaps in the future, we'll never know. Wait and see.
Cameron, thank you for your insightful comments. The Beautiful Harpies is wonderfully dark, compelling read. You continue to distinguish yourself by creating immersive worlds that are challenged to their very core. Cam, we can't wait for your next installment.
Thank you very much, Alix. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you, Cam. And don't forget, buy books.